I'd like to call to order the January 11th, 2023 meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If you could all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here with us this evening, as well as those of you who are viewing from home. Tonight is the first evening of our new agenda format, where we are beginning with information reports in a committee of the whole format. And from there, we will move directly into the regular agenda with the consent agenda and action items. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session on December 19th regarding legal, personnel, and student discipline, and prior to this meeting regarding negotiations, personnel, safety, and student discipline. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. With that, I will call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Prevocore.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Ms. Zidney. Here.
Okay, thank you. With this time, Mr. Johnson is going to provide us the superintendent's update.
Thank you, Amber. I have a number of updates for this evening. The district is now accepting new student registrations for the 23-24 school year. For kindergarten or any other grades, please visit our website for details. This only applies to new students who are currently not part of this district. If your child is already enrolled in the district, there is no need to re-register. A special welcome to our class of 2036 students. Man. So the State College Area School District Board of Directors and Administration can hear community sentiment regarding school resource officers. We are holding a forum this month. Following that, we will have an informational sessions featuring a panel discussion. The first event will take place on Thursday, January 26th from 6 to 8 p.m. in the State High Cafeteria Large Group Instruction Room. At this meeting, we hope to facilitate engaging, open conversations led by facilitators. Through small group discussions, participants will have the opportunity to share perspectives and hopefully come away with a deeper understanding of the SRO position. As a follow-up, on Monday, February 13th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m. in the high school small auditorium, a panel consisting of the district administrators and high school SRO will discuss the feedback received from the January 28th event. Elizabeth Siegelman, the program coordinator for community conferencing of Center County, will serve as the panel moderator. Another announcement is that the Giant Companies Feeding School Kids Roundup program is again benefiting State College Area School District students. Throughout January and February, when you shop at Giant, you can round up at the register. The Giant Company will match all donations up to $250,000. Thank you, Giant, for supporting our food services program and students. Additionally, congratulations to Park Forest Middle School 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade Quiz Bowl teams on their performances and the nationwide 3-2-1 competitions. The 7th and 8th grade team finished first in Pennsylvania and third in the nation. The 6th grade team finished first in both Pennsylvania and in the nation. Way to go, Park Forest Quiz Bowl. The board of directors are having a board conversation with the community tomorrow, Thursday at 12:30 p.m. The event will take place in SLO Center Region Library's Downsbrow Community Room. We invite any community member to attend at this, as this is an open opportunity for people to connect with the board members on any district-related topic they choose.
Great.
And that would be it for my updates.
Thank you. Board members, any communication items? Okay. And then Jackie, or I'm sorry, I'll start with Jackie. Do you have any legislative matters to report?
Oh, yeah. So I
Yes.
cut this down a lot, just so you guys know. It
Okay.
could have been longer. Most importantly, perhaps to us, is that Governor-elect Josh Shapiro announced that his pick for Pennsylvania Education Secretary will be Khalid Moomin, who is the current superintendent of the Lower Merion School District and also worked in the Reading School District before that. So we're looking forward to see what develops there, although we're sad to see the current education secretary go. The new 2-year legislative session has begun in the PA General Assembly, and bills are being circulated and reintroduced. The Senate has gotten to work. The new Senate Education Committee is David Argall, and the minority chair is Lindsey Williams. They have been at work today. They passed an omnibus constitutional amendment to tighten voter ID laws and make it easier to override regulations, and to create a 2-year window for childhood victims of sexual abuse to sue their perpetrators. All of these would go on the May primary ballot if passed by the House, but the House has to approve it by the end of January, and right now the House has been adjourned, and we're not sure when they're coming back in session because they're not really sure who's even in charge at this point, unfortunately, so there's a lot of back and forth going on in the House. And the current majority leader is Mark Rossi, who, although he's a Democrat, says he will not caucus with either party and will act as an independent. However, he has so far declined to change his registration. So we're not expecting a lot of movement out of the House anytime soon.
He's a registered Republican.
Mark Rossi is registered as a Democrat.
Democrat. All right.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
confused.
It is confusing. I will give you that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. You're good.
Sorry, apologies.
Great news. One of our new senators that's going to be representing SCASD, state senator, I should say, Wayne Langerhawk, has opened up a Center County office right on Science Park Road. And I am hoping to visit soon and invite him to tour the district and come say hi. So hopefully he'll take us up on that offer. And then finally, PSBA is having a Spring Advocacy Day. They've announced it will be at the state capitol on April 18th. So if anyone would be interested in going to that, they are also having a virtual event, so you can participate in person, or you could participate virtually if you'd be at all interested. So put that on your calendar. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. So we'll have to keep tabs on when the House comes back into the session then.
Yeah, I'm hearing that they might not be back until mid-February, but everything is up in the air at this point.
Okay.
There was a late, right before we met, Republican leadership in the House did, let's see, I have a note here. They offered to come back in session on Tuesday with last session's rules
Oh.
temporarily. I'm not sure that might be a non-starter. It's hard to tell where that will go.
Interesting, okay. Gretchen and Peter, the COG report?
Yeah, so I'll start with the non-SPPA communications items, and then I'll hand it over to Peter. So the Council of Governments Facilities Committee met, and they are starting their process of a new facilities master plan. So it's interesting to watch that unfold, because I know that our district will be doing that pretty soon as well. And also in that facilities committee meeting, we saw pictures of the flooding that happened in SCLO Library, and the librarian there and some other folks went in immediately around midnight when they were aware that this was happening from the cold spell with burst pipes, and were shoveling water out in the middle of the night with snow shovels in SCLO. And because they did that and everybody reacted so quickly, they actually saved a lot of damage from occurring that would have happened. So they, somebody told me they walked in over the weekend and said that they couldn't even tell anything had happened. So kudos to them. And then the Whitehall Road Park, just wanted to update you that they're working on finding what the path will be for a new project manager for that project and the Millbrook Marsh project, because it's currently vacant. And hopefully continuing work on the park as soon as possible. And that's it for me. Peter, do you have anything from the SPPA?
No, the solar power working group update is later on when we talk about facilities and grounds.
Great. Okay, so student representative update. Do you have any update for us from student perspective?
I would say not at the moment, but if I do later, could I, maybe pitch in?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Thanks, Neil.
All right.
Okay, so moving on to information reports, we're going to begin with Culture, Climate, and Learning Committee. The first item is the K-5 Social Studies resource shown in attachment 4A1, and I will turn it over to Carlene and Laurel to run this portion of the meeting during Culture, Climate, and Learning items, and just recognize Ms. Yoder and Ms. Bauer, who are here at the table with us. So, thank you.
Yeah. We turn it over to you. Thank you.
Would you like me to start, or would you like to start?
Doesn't matter.
We didn't discuss this part, but we talked a lot about this. As was already shared, and I know that Carlene and Laurel sent out an email to the board, we had discussed pretty extensively the at the December CCL, the Social Study Resource. You should have that attachment that you were to review. And so just as a reminder, that presentation was prepared in December. With the new way we're doing the board meetings, we wanted to bring it here. It is posted, and we're hoping that it can be on the board agenda for January 23rd.
Yes.
And those items are still, if people wish to be in touch with you. Oh, I'm sorry. If people similar to textbooks, if people do wish to take a look at them, they should contact your office and
That's-
you'll make arrangements.
That's right, Laurel. I did get a link from the company that would allow me to sit down with a person who would like to look at it so that we have a little bit of access time, so that if somebody would like to review it with me, I'd be happy to do that.
A process question, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're in this period of transition from the subcommittee approach to the committee of the whole, we may have items that come forward to the committee of the whole, which is how we're sitting now, that have already been addressed through a subcommittee. In that earlier world, we might not give full, as deep attention in the full board meeting to certain questions because they had already come forward in a meeting which was open to the community, for participation or attendance or whatever. But we're going to have a mixture of items here, some things that were presented before and some not. So the only request I would have in terms of my own understanding of what we're doing is if we get to something which has not yet come through a subcommittee, if we can go do a deeper dive into those items now, so that, because we're replacing that earlier system, to which we might give 10 or 15 or 20 minutes of attention. So, and I'm not suggesting we do that. I don't want to drag us here till midnight as we do this, but at the same time, in terms of good faith representation of our past practice, I think it might be valuable to at least give sufficient attention. There are a couple items yet on this agenda regarding the elementary reading resource and gifted screening, for example, that have not been addressed yet.
Correct,
So-
and they will
Okay.
be full conversations
Right.
tonight. So this was just the quick overview since it had been presented,
Right.
so that we could spend more time on those two
Okay.
items.
Great, thanks very much.
we did discuss this, and because this was one of the items that was in limbo, because it was discussed before, so they were just going to kind of give a brief
Sounds
overview.
really good. Thank you.
So just briefly, our social studies program is in need of updating. So we've spent 2 to 3 years, because of the pandemic, it slowed us down a little bit. And so we've spent some time trying to create units with social studies. And then as we dove into it, realized we really needed a resource. So then we spent some time in the summer, 2 summers ago, reviewing resources, and then landed on Inquiry Journeys as the core resource for our K-5 social studies program. It was a multi-year program. As we connected with K-12, like we've done the whole research year K-12, and we have staggered implementation. The high school's already implementing. Middle school is next, and now elementary. We like to do it all at once, but we've had to make some adjustments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did want to just call for those who didn't see this, because it did come up in this subcommittee before. The memo that you wrote did include some discussion of the other resources, which I think is an important component, and people may want to look at that to see what some of the alternatives were that were considered.
And this is a unique resource for us, because it's completely a digital platform, and it's a digital platform for the teachers. It's not a student interaction program for students to get on and do social studies electronically. And we really like that with social studies, because we know how things change in the world, and it allows the content to be curated and kept up to date. So we really enjoyed that very much. And we felt it was the one that definitely met our district's policy about equity and inclusivity,
Thank you.
where the others did not.
From having participated in the earlier meeting, I was hoping you would mention, or that would be mentioned. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else on social studies?
And we normally, and this is something that we'll probably need to work out, because we have, when we've had committee meetings, had an opportunity for public comment at each one. We are just starting this new process, and so that will be something. But certainly if members of the community have questions, we are not making a vote on this tonight, and so it is certainly appropriate to send those into the full board or to our administrators, both questions or comments.
To bring them up through the public comment session, which is
For
following.
this one, yes, right.
Okay, should I move on to the reading one?
Yes.
Yes, please, thank you.
We'll take a lot more time on this one, but not an incredible amount, because Jonathan is also presenting this evening, and I wanted to leave enough time for him. We followed the same process as we did with social studies. With the research here, again, was K-12. we worked 2 summers ago with Chris Merritt and I to look at the audit that we did several years ago that started before the pandemic. And we looked at our achievement data, we looked at current research about reading, we looked at the standards, and as we went through that process, then we were digging into our curriculum, and I know you've already approved the 6 to 12 curriculum updates, so they're already busy working on that. We established the need for a core resource in reading because of currently we have a common curriculum, but we have multiple resources. And so what's happening with that is there's a lack of coherence as students move through the system because there's not something like Bridges in mathematics. When you visited classrooms, you could see Bridges and you could see it from year to year building. And so we just felt like there was a need for that in reading. Additionally, with the new research that's coming out about reading, that maybe isn't so new, but is really being highlighted, that we felt like we needed to have a resource that was more up to date with supporting the current research on reading. Additionally, what PDE is asking us to do with structured literacy, felt like we needed to take a look at different reading resources. So I started, like I always do, I went on edreports.org and looked for all the resources that were green. I called all the companies and got the resources in, and we reviewed them this summer. We created a rubric, very similar. It's linked into the memo if you would like to see it, and went through each of the resources that you see listed, far more than we did for social studies. And from that, identified 3 that we wanted to consider, and then we had presentations from those companies. And then there were 2 that both Interreading from Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and McGraw-Hill with Wonders, that we wanted to do site visits. So Northern Allegheny School District was very nice to host us, and we saw Interreading there. And then we went to Bethlehem School District, and we saw Wonders there. And after that process, the committee, reflected on all of the things. You can see the summarizing document, which is if you have a lot of time on your plate, there's a lot of information in that one. That can then it emerged that Interreading from HMH was the strongest program. The other piece that we liked about Interreading was it's aligned with ECRI and has an ECRI overlay, so that we'll need to purchase that as well. The current ECRI that's in our classrooms is aligned with Journeys, and with phonics, as you know, the scope and sequence is critical, and so it has to align and match up, so we need to purchase the new overlay, and Interreading and ECRI do align, so we would be able to move forward with that. So Danielle and I met with the reps just last week. And so when we come back in January 23rd, we'll have the full quote available for you. Right now, we don't have the full quote, but we will have that for you so that you can consider that as part, because it is a big ticket item. But when we think about elementary school reading, it's probably the most important thing that we teach at the elementary level. So we want to make sure that we get that right. The reason we're bringing it forward now and then asking for approval on January 23rd is we want to implement this next year. We don't want to wait anymore, especially with structured literacy coming from PDE. We'd like to move forward, and so that means we need to be able to plan our professional development. We want to make sure we're starting the professional development with our principals, curriculum directors, and instructional coaches. That's the very first PD that Danielle and I scheduled with the representatives last week. And then we'll move into some PD for our teachers, even starting on March 27th. Our hope is to try to have an initial training on March 27th, and then we've already mapped out trainings for the summer and into the fall, and then using a good chunk of our in-service time throughout the year next year so that teachers can have, there are 5 half-days next year, and so having five of those half-days be for reading as they're, like, if they do Unit 1, then have another PD session, do Unit 2, have another PD session, so we're kind of staggering it, and they're taking little chunks instead of the whole chunk of a reading program. So that's our plan. So we're moving furiously to make sure that we're getting teachers the support that they need to be successful and feel comfortable. The other piece that the company has been wonderful with, if the board approves this on the 23rd, I just need to write like a one-sentence memo to them saying you've approved it, and then they'll send us the teacher manuals for every single teacher and give us access to their online tool, which gives them electronic access to everything. And then come July 1, we'll order all the other things and then have them, shipped. But at least we can get some work with teachers digging into the teachers' manuals. The coaches and I are beginning to do that already. The instructional coaches digging into the teacher manuals to look at what are the things that we must do, what are the things that might be some optional, and how do we want to pace this out over the course of the first year. So we just feel like we need which is why we're coming now and not waiting, because we feel like if we're going to implement this next year, we need some time to plan and get ready for successful implementation. Did I miss anything, Danielle?
I don't think. I think it's important, fast and furious now, but Deirdre really took the lead of the ELA committee and has spent, as you know, when we recommended the middle and high school, we said we're not ready. It is a shift in our approach, but it still has flexibility to provide a workshop model. So I know that that is important to this district. The nice thing about this is it is fully aligned to support the structured literacy, so there will be pieces that really support the foundations in primary of the phonics, phonemic awareness, the fluency, and then the vocab and comprehension. The other nice thing is it's really, because it has the ECRI overlay and the supports we put in with title and special education, those teachers will be trained too, and students who need to receive additional services, everything should align. So they'll be receiving their core in the core and then the supplementals that they need. This decision wasn't easy. The groups met, then we came back, and then they met, and the principals really came in at the end too, if they could come. But it was a lot of time and discussion, and even an understanding and a shift of this is what the research says right now. We're working on 20 years of new research that says this is what a child needs in order to become a lifelong reader, and we felt this resource was the best to really support that.
I have questions, but I think that we should let other people go first.
So with this resource, all students in the core will have phonics, phonemic awareness, fluency work, that direct instruction, right?
Yes.
They currently do, but we're using a variety of resources.
Right.
So again, it's about getting a coherent approach. So as kids go through our system, there's coherence across the system.
And again, that coherence will lead into all three tiers, because everybody in all 8 elementary schools in the tier 1 are using it. It'll also align with our title, our ESL, and our special education.
So does it have particular materials that you'll be using at?
Just going to say we're ordering teacher manuals for all of those groups. So title, ESL, and special education will have the same resources plus electronic access to the resources. And there's an ESL component that we did order. And so, and then there's a title like RTI kind of support intervention. But a big piece of what we do in those interventions is pre-teaching, so that they have the same manuals and resources that we're using in general education so that they can provide some pre-teaching is really helpful.
Okay.
Any other question?
Amy?
No, go ahead. This is Amy's thing.
Yeah, I won't do this for every committee of the whole, but you're going to have to indulge me on this one because this is a culmination of a lot of personal advocacy work that I've done since I've joined the board. And I know that this is a big paradigm shift for some of our educators. And so I think stories are really powerful. So I'm going to share a quick personal story. And I hope that you refer teachers that are anxious about making this change to this information. So most of my board mates know that I have twins that have gone through the system and they're currently in 9th grade. And one of my twins has dyslexia, and one of my twins is highly gifted in verbal and identified as highly gifted in verbal. And so I've literally lived with the two extremes and watched them go through our system. And what I can tell you is that even when you provide a love of reading and you have a child who's highly gifted, if you do not give them the appropriate tools, they may love reading in elementary school, but later they will become frustrated and angry because they don't have the proper tools. And they won't be able to sound out words, and they'll be embarrassed when they speak in class. They will be frustrated at other times, and they will struggle with spelling for the rest of their life. And those are the repercussions. And then if you have the other extreme in a child with profound dyslexia, they may spend many, many years in private tutoring. They may then spend many years in private therapy to deal with the trauma as a result of that. And fruitfully, when they are given the right tools, they can eventually exceed the MAP scores for not only the district, but the nation. So this approach is just profoundly critical for all students. And so I just beg teachers to not be frightened or disappointed that we're making this change, because I have lived 14 years with both extremes of students, and they will all thrive when the right program is used. And so that's the one thing I want to say. And then the other thing I want to bring to the board's attention, or the district's attention, is many schools are making this change, obviously, and they're also learning that when they have made this change, that they have a multitude of students in secondary who never received these skills. And so there's a very illuminating article, I believe it was in the New York Times within the last couple weeks, in the state of Tennessee, where they are actually going back and teaching these fundamental skills to children in high school. They're integrating it into their ELA structure and providing those kids to catch up and get those skills that they never received. And I think that's a really important thing for us to start considering, because we don't have to let that whole number of students leave our district without at least trying to address those skills that they never received. So those are my two comments, and of course, great thanks that we're finally heading down this road. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy.
Any other questions?
I just want to acknowledge all the things Amy just mentioned. When I first came on the board, I was watching, I think at the time they were presenting, or I heard of the introduction of the last ELA, basically the reading and writing programs that existed. And my assumption had been at the time that the science of reading was part of that, but it wasn't as much. And in this instance, this is so heartening, this is so reassuring that we're going in the direction of implementing things that in my own professional experience have been talked about, well, in my last 5 to 10 years of practice anyway, in terms of aligning the phonological nature of language in print and teaching that code to the kids. Here's one of the things in terms of just following on the kinds of things that Amy just mentioned. One of the things we'll have to ask of our professionals is that they tolerate working in a scripted program, because so often, historically, in my experience in the district, there's an inclination on the part of individuals for a time that was even building-based, for people to want to make something their own or create something that they find interesting or builds their enthusiasm for teaching, but leaves the structure of a coherent scripted lesson. That you can't give in to that impulse to do this well, to implement a science-based, evidence-based program, which involves using the scripted materials that are provided to teach these fundamental skills, because it involves a certain amount of repetition, it involves doing things in a specified way. So I'm going to encourage our staff that they take a deep breath, as Amy just mentioned, and just give their energy towards following a prescription, if you will, for doing the things that we know help develop young readers.
Go ahead. Oh, just what you're saying, Dan, I think aligns and connects with the other major focus at elementary is our MTSS work.
Yes.
And so part of MTSS is making sure we have integrity and fidelity to what we say we're doing, because as you, as a school psychologist, know that if we can't say that, then we can't identify a student. Like, we have to make sure that we've assured that what we said we're doing, we're actually doing. So I think having the MTSS work that we've been working on so hard this year, connected to the reading resource, connected to the structured literacy 10 hours of PD that PDE is telling us we have to do, I feel like it's all coming together so that it's like a systematic, connected approach to a change.
And I would say that, and with the implementation of ECRI in some of the schools for almost 3 years, the data we've collected, it's actually in all 8 elementary schools in some capacity at this point, which is explicit with regards to phonics. I think it's important to just share again that when we really looked at student growth percentile, when we were looking at reading benchmarks, our students that were in the 96th% to begin with rose even higher, which oftentimes they're the kids that you can't sustain that growth. So it definitely grew our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students very well, but it really showed that adding it to all, like Amber asked, has a benefit, as Amy shared, to all. The other thing that you shared that's been important to us, and our principals are eager to be instructional leaders, is we are starting with them. We can't get change across this district without all 8 elementary schools and all of our directors that have a focus. So that is why we would really, when we say the 23rd, we want our principals trained, and they're even saying we want to be able to teach. So they need to be the models so that when they're in those and we're coming back, we can go in and look at classrooms and help our teachers understand the why, because it is important when they've had different shifts and they've had success in a certain way, but help them understand that this is really creating an equitable system in their classroom.
Just to add one thing that what Danielle said, we have an in-service day on the 13th, and Danielle and I are doing a webinar for all elementary faculty for just about an hour, to provide the why, to share the journey, to talk about the whole process, so that's our first step. Now, we've been sharing information throughout. I send talking points out. They're embedded in my newsletter, so that's not new news. But to be able to go through the whole process with our faculty is what we're planning to do on Friday as part of the in-service time.
Do you have any other question?
I just can't just smile from ear to ear.
Okay, so I'll be a counterbalance.
The different pieces. I mean, I'd love to hear the different moving parts and all the integration of the administrative level, of the engagement, the moving with a rapid pace to introduce this into the system, recognizing it takes a long time for system change to occur. It's just, I really am so impressed with the information you're sharing. It's really reassuring. And there's one echo in this. Maybe this is worth the question I'm asking or not in terms of an answer. But when you introduce the math curriculum, I'm hearing some parallels to the ways in which Numbers basically was the program that we went with. And that involved making some site visits and learning about it locally and getting some feedback from those who were using that program. I hear the same process being followed here. Was there anything about this isn't maybe something that's not crossed your mind yet, but was there anything in that experience of introducing that program that's informing you about introducing this reading curriculum to the school district in terms of the things that were learned from that either opportunities that emerged that you didn't expect or whatever, anything along those lines from your earlier experience?
Excuse me,
there's one.
Dan,
Sorry.
we're going to have to move on.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the problems, is that this is both a huge impact on every child in the district. It is also a very large expenditure. And we will, as co-chairs, we need to move on. I will tell you individually, I feel more needs to be said and discussed. And I hear the plea for we've really got to get it done. This is too big to just, I'm sorry, that's my personal opinion. We need to schedule more time for this. At this point, we've been told we need to move on.
And I understand that, but I think what I'm hearing from the board is everybody's on board with this discussion that has voiced their opinion so far.
I'm not going to take the time.
Okay. And I think we need to stop regurgitating what people have already said.
Right.
I think we need to ask questions that are pertaining to the topic and get feedback that way and then move on.
I understand.
And I'll just say, PD is the key.
Got it.
That'd be my one thing.
Thank you.
Last time we purchased a major resource, math. No, for reading. 10
Could-
years,
Never.
Yeah, could we move on to
Can
the
we,
gift?
I would like to say this. We have never purchased a reading resource to this
Right.
capacity, and it has been
And we've needed one.
10 or more years since we purchased one, but other people were piecing things together. The ECRI was a grant, and we have purchased materials for that, but we've been piecing together resources. I understand that this is a large cost. We have talked to Randy. We have looked at what is the non-negotiable of this and what is not. The need for a resource in order to, again, begin to implement equitable practices that contain the key components of reading, I just believe is necessary. I want to say that, understanding that it is a large cost, a one-time, I think 90% of it is a one-time cost for 6 years that has the benefit of supporting kids for a lifetime to become readers.
Not doing this is not just neutral, it's harmful.
I
Not
think we
doing
need
this
to
is
move on.
harmful.
I'm sorry. Because this is the time limit we've been given. We have someone who has to do another report. We were given this time limit. We have already gone over. It is a huge topic.
Would you like us to bring it for approval to the 23rd meeting as requested?
Yes.
That's what we've been told to do. So-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we
Thank you.
move on to the gifted universal screening?
You get to sit still. You get another presentation partner.
Hi, friend. Are you
Hi,
presenting up
Jonathan.
above, or
I
are
was
you?
going to, but I don't see what I need, so
Will
they
this
already
be
have it.
projected or no?
I can project. I can grab the stuff. Give me a second.
Jonathan, now you have 5 minutes.
They were already making fun of me because they know how much I like to talk as it is.
And this is attached to the agenda for people who want to look at
Correct,
home.
yes. So yearly, we want to make sure that you understand where we are with the universal screening process in terms of related to gifted. So I just took a large training document that I use all over the state when I talk about universal screening and kind of narrowed it down to just make sure that everyone understands where we are with things in terms of gifted. So just as a quick reminder that universal screening is part of Chapter 16 law. There is not really a best practice that is part of the law. However, we're really working, I work very closely with the compliance officer and the technical assistance people from the IUs who are really trying to balance compliance versus best practice. And as part of my dissertation and research work, there's plenty of evidence and support to shows that you can do universal screening really, really quickly and not be very effective, or you can spend some money on it, which we have been blessed to be able to do and have a more efficient process. So if this isn't going to, I don't know if this is going to work. It's okay. So anyway, as you move through that presentation on there, that's just a little bit of history of where we've been with our universal screening process that really started back after our monitoring came through from PDE in about 2015. Since that time, we've really used best practices to eliminate some of the research issues, including relying on subjective referrals, really making sure that teachers are not a gate away from gifted students. There's plenty of research that also suggests that. And trying to be matching a little bit more of the processes that match our GMDE process.
Can you just,
keep going.
GMD is gifted
The gifted multidisciplinary evaluation. Yep, sorry, too much. Go a little bit. One more up. So just so that everyone, just a quick reminder that the gifted identification process is two-pronged. It does require an IQ of around 130, and there's multiple measures that are also included as a part of that piece. And there's that, again, the history of where we are. What I'm really excited about what we're doing right now with our equity plan and the opportunity to really cast that net out is taking a look at specifically not just our English language learners now, but I'm also taking a deeper look at some of our marginalized populations, specifically our African American students, Hispanic students, who are in the research and the literature the most disproportionately identified for gifted. The bigger issue that does come with this is that every state has its own definition of gifted. There really isn't one set definition, and Pennsylvania's is one of the most restrictive in the state. So that does make my job a little bit more difficult in trying to, work through the law, but also make sure that we're honoring the diversity and equity that we have within our district. So this is just a quick update, and I knew that at some point when I started in this job I would get to this point, and we're finally kind of seeing the tip of when we have just as many students entering our gifted program, but then also graduating. And I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see from this chart that we're going to reach that in about probably 24, 25. And that's coming to I would say about 650 students. And again, I'm talking only those that are identified as mentally gifted. We're not necessarily talking about those that have a GIEP, those that are twice exceptional. Anyone that has some sort of identification of gifted will fit within that. And being at 10% is about what's in the literature, and maybe even a little bit higher, which I would expect given the population. So I'm really happy to see that number is kind of on track. And just in terms of universal screening itself, when we didn't do universal screening because of COVID, we did a double year last year, but you will see that we are picking up approximately 50 to 60 new cases or new fines every year, and that number seems to be consistent. Just so that you know, the difference between third and fourth grade is still probably historically when we were also looking at second grade, so that's where I think those numbers are a little bit off between between third and fourth grade. I also wanted to update you to kind of show you where our racial breakdown is of our gifted identification, and this pretty much matches everything that I'm reading in all the literature right now, where our Asian and white students are overly identified compared to some of our other populations, which is why part of our extra screening levels this year is really trying to take a look at what best practices are out there to see if we can get more students through universal screening to a school psychologist. There is a really great study out of Florida that shows that if you can get kids to a school psychologist, if they've been trained appropriately, which I'm really proud of ours here, that they will be able to work through some of the different profiles of students to make sure that if language is a barrier, race a barrier, those types of things, that we can kind of work through that to really hit that piece of finding that IQ.
Jonathan,
Yes.
just really quickly, could you possibly amend the presentation just at some point with a similar outlay of what our population is, just so the public can see the discrepancy really clearly?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
That would, I just think, be helpful to be able to point the public to visualize that difference.
Not a problem. Yep, I can add that in.
Thanks.
So again, in all the literature, our data is very similar to what I'm reading out there in terms of that piece. So some of the questions that we're really looking at now are how does objective data affect screening results for those in marginalized populations? We're also looking at what the importance of nonverbal assessments are when trying to identify IQ, especially with language barriers, students' experiences. I mean, we just had the reading conversation. This directly affects this as well. And then finally, one of the major things that I'm more concerned about, which is what I do continuous advocacy work for, is taking a look at Chapter 16 and how restrictive it is, and how, in my opinion, it is not equitable under many situations, and what we can continue to do to maybe take the first step in going back to PDE and saying we want to do things a little bit differently that are going to be more equitable for students in gifted identification. So the last thing that I have is just kind of where we are with the equity plan and where we are with things right now. I've already contacted all of those students in third grade who are kind of moving forward with this secondary layer of screening, talk to those parents. I'm in the process right now of screening all of those students using the COGAT, but we're going to do the level form right below, which is completely nonverbal. So students do not need any sort of verbal comprehension to succeed in that. Working closely with the authors of COGAT and some of their data analyzers as well, to be able to, data analysts, to be able to take a look at our data and compare to see the reliability of what their scores were in the third grade screen versus what they were on the level below that. And then also in the process of sending out rating scales to parents to be able to see if they're seeing something different at home with their child, and potentially using that data in moving students forward as well. So again, we're still under the restrictions of the law, but I think it's also time, as Donna Ford from Ohio State says, sometimes you have to break some laws when it's best practices for kids. So. How'd I do, everyone? Was that okay?
Good.
That was right?
I just want to clarify something, get a question. I know that Chapter 16 does set those guidelines that you went through, the 100. Is there anything that says that a district couldn't have a broad, I know that's a minimal, but could a district adopt a broader identification criteria if the district chose? It may not
Sure.
be mandated, but could we if we chose to as a district?
So there's two parts to that. So number one is 130, a student can have an IQ of under 130, but then the law also states that they must, giftedness they must have qualities that strongly indicate giftedness, which is still kind of potentially an issue depending on where they are. The other part of Chapter 16 is an experimental status. So we could apply for experimental status if we were to get to that point to be able to do something different, which would ultimately be my goal once we have some more research to be able to act on and to be able to make some other recommendations. But that would ultimately be my suggestion, and I think with all of the conversations and all the training that I'm in and involved with, I'm hopeful that the state is going to be acting on disproportionality in gifted education in the coming years, and that Chapter 16 is going to see some modifications.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Just for multiple things, twice exceptional students, inequities that we see among marginalized populations, restrictiveness of the criteria, yeah.
I just wanted to, that was really informative, thank you. I just wanted to ask a quick question, if you could just give us a teeny bit of history. I feel like I participated in a district-wide committee that had teachers, parents, whatever, looking at gifted education, because we used to have an exception to do things sort of our own way, and then we were sort of found to be under-identifying, I think, right, particular students, and so then we went to this more objective process, and so now what I'm hearing is that the more objective process, we're still disproportionate, so we're asking to maybe go back to something that's going to be more subjective, potentially, and so I'm just, if that's the correct history, are we just going to go back to where we were
So no,
before?
but I know exactly what you're trying to say.
Okay,
So
thank you.
we are on a little bit of a pendulum swing.
Right.
And again, the bigger issue comes with the monitoring that happened in 2015. We were really not, we were not universally screening, number one. And the second part is the system that had been in place for many, many years had become what the state said was general education. So at that point, Tier 1 and Tier 2 enrichment supports were available. There were very few students at that time, and you can see, can you scroll back up to that chart? There were a little bit higher. I'm sorry, higher. There were very few students in that 2014-15 that had actually been identified as mentally gifted, and in a school district our size and with our population, we should be having around 10% being identified. So that's where the state came in and said, you need to start following Chapter 16. If there would be changes in the future, I would never see the Tier 3, I'd like to say, or those students who need specially designed instruction ever going away. But I would like to start experimenting in the future with thinking about what other Tier 2 and Tier 1 enrichment experiences could come back in, which is, again, another best practice under the Rosenzweig model as well. So it's a little bit of both, but we would never go back to not doing anything under Chapter 16 at that point.
That's
So
super helpful.
you're exactly right. There, it's a little, it's like that, and then we stopped a little bit, but yeah.
That's great. Thank you for the clarification.
I know there was one question too about numbers, and I just wanted to let you know as well. I did pull this up. They're all combined with special education and gifted education, but we are very, very close with the number of school referrals that are coming in every year, as well as parent referrals. So just some real quick numbers, because I know, Laurel, you had asked about this. Well, it wasn't loading on mine, so that's fine. I'll update the presentation for everyone. But when we talk about a school-based referral, we'd be talking about whether the school team is recommending, whether they're going through RTI for SLD in our elementary system or anything like that. And on average, between special education and gifted, we're pushing about 240 evaluations or requests per year. Parents are about 150. And we are about, like I said, about 55 to 60 universal screening for gifted. The one thing that I know with gifted universal screening that has since changed is now that parents are more informed. I invite them to meetings to learn about our identification processes. I get involved in conversations early. We've been able to screen students before going down the full evaluation route because of the amount of testing that goes through all of this. If we can do a brief screening on a child to realize that their IQ is probably not going to meet the state qualification, we can save that child a lot of time and sometimes even aggravation and stuff. And parents still have that right to be able to request an evaluation if they so choose. But we've really been, I feel that our universal screening process is getting the right kids, and now it's just making sure that we're getting all of the right kids. That's the bigger difference right now.
Any other questions? If not, I think CCO is.
Rest.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks, that was great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on to facilities and grounds. We have Randy Brown at the table with us. And I'll turn it over to Peter and Gretchen.
Yep. So, we, before we say anything about the solar power purchase agreement working group, folks should know that we've had conversations about what is pending on the agenda coming up. For us, obviously, anything related to a facility or a physical plant object could show up as we move along. But a sustainability policy is something that's in discussion, but we don't want to put anything on an agenda that we're not going to have a substantive update about. So that's something that will be coming, but is not on this agenda. The boundary study is something that will be ongoing until it's complete, and obviously that's going to take some time as well. And the solar power working group, anything that would be related to a facilities master plan or a major capital improvement project. So Gretchen and Randy and I have had good communications about that. Do you want to add anything to that, Gretchen? Okay. So the solar power purchase is, hold on, we had a really good project management team meeting this morning, and we had a meeting of the working group. So as you know, we've had 2 power purchase agreements proposed to us. And Greg Shively at Green Sky has continued to engage with those 2 firms in order to get the best pricing and knowledge about the projects before we actually submit volumes, which is the next thing that we are going to have to do in order for us to make a decision and for us to really get a final agreement back. Would you agree with that, Randy? Mm-hmm. Okay. We've also had a proposal from a retailer, Direct Energy, come to us, and I think that we can say, it was part of the public meeting today, that Greg was able to negotiate the initial cost down about 15%. So a proposal came to us. The retailer, Direct Energy, had said that they could manage whatever a solar PPA would be for us for the entire group at $7,500 a month. And he was able to negotiate that down. Now, another $1,000. We hope that it can come down even more. Okay. So we still need a legal review of the power purchase agreement, and we were hoping to have on the agenda this evening an approval for that, but we had to pull it off because Randy doesn't have the requisite materials. Do you want to say anything about that?
Late this afternoon, I got the final materials, but have not had a chance to review them.
Okay. So we would assume that that's probably going to be on the next agenda.
On the next agenda, yes.
For approval. That's great. So some of the big takeaways, I would say, where we are right now is that looking at current prices, Greg and Green Sky have determined that despite some declines in the broader market, the proposals that we have now are still really, really favorable, and there has basically been no impact to the proposals that we've had. So I think that's really good. We cross our fingers that remains the same. Those rates are unchanged. But the volume commitments are the next thing. So if you remember looking back to earlier this year, we had that discussion that was over in Memorial Field about what we thought the volume ought to be, and we had submitted a range of our total volume. Our total volume is just over 14 million kilowatt hours of electricity, and we had said between 60 and 85% of that. So I believe at our next meeting, we are going to be asked to commit some volume. Is that correct, Randy?
The next working group meeting, you mean?
Yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. So that will be coming. We will have a full presentation on that because that's going to be a pretty significant agenda item. We can share the presentation that was given at the project management team, or sorry, at the working group meeting tonight, so folks will be able to review that ahead of time, and any questions that you have, preferably ahead of time so that we can prepare the answers for those questions, because even, I think, for those of us who have been connected with this thing for going on 4 years, right? There's still a lot of work and attempts at explaining it and making it as clear as absolutely possible. So I think I guess the last things that I'll say on this is that the general advice that Greg gave to us this morning is that, so if a group, the school district, Harris Township, the housing authority, whoever it is, if what they are doing is trying to have the sort of the simplest way to manage the risks and manage price is to do a 50-50, right? You know that 50% of your electricity will be in the power purchase agreement and 50% will be in just whatever the market is doing. It's easy. It's just very easy to work with, and it's easy to understand. Do you want to add anything to that, Randy or Gretchen? No? Okay. If the organization has stated carbon goals or aspires to have carbon goals, a higher number is better, right? Because there's more environmental performance associated with it, more carbon emissions reductions associated with it. So both of those things will have to be a part of our conversation when we go to finally submit the volume. Is there anything that you would care to add?
I know that many of you have been following along, and I know that sometimes I feel like I'm caught up, and sometimes I feel like I'm getting pulled back in my knowledge base. I would like to think that many of you would say, why only 50% into the solar and not more? And how I best describe it to me is that you're making a commitment of 50% of your power to solar energy, using solar energy, and that there is a price lock on the solar energy that you are purchasing. However, that solar energy is not the electrons that we will use. It is the electrons that will go onto the grid. We will pay for the production of those electrons. They will be loaded onto the grid. Therefore, we will get a credit for those electrons being added to the grid, and then we will have to pay for the actual electrons that we use. And so the second two pieces are what's called a settlement. And sometimes the settlement does not match up perfectly equal to what you pay for the solar. So the solar is a fixed price, the settlement is still variable.
Right.
And so
I think that's going to need to have a lot more explanation.
Exactly. Yeah, and that'll have to be part of the,
Right.
When we do this, we're going to have to make it a pretty significant agenda item. So we just got this presentation this morning, right? So what Randy just said, you get the settlement, and sometimes you're going to get paid for it, and sometimes you may not be. So we've also, Greg at Green Sky has done scenarios where he said, well, what if the cost was 50% higher in the market, and what if the cost was 50% lower? I want to say before I go any further, the likelihood that it's 50% lower is really, really, really small, and the likelihood that it's 50% higher is significantly higher. So the chance that you save money, or actually that you get money back through the settlement, is high. But when you do 50% makes a lot of this pretty simple, and it's unlikely that you're going to lose against the market.
Correct.
Right.
Well,
So the more you put in.
I'm not going to wager a bet on whether we will lose against or win against the market.
And that's part of it's impossible to know
Right.
what electricity prices are. You can look at trends and all these sort of things, and you can have really good guesses.
And Greg's scenarios have been over the last 12 months. Is the last 12 months what we can expect in the future? Is it even typical of what, has normally happened?
Right.
And I'm not trying to be a naysayer in any way, shape, or form. I'm just being completely honest with the information that we have been presented with.
Right.
The only other thing that I will say is that I believe that, well, first of all, we have locked-in prices till June of '23. So we have just under 6 months of locked-in prices on electricity. So we have a choice. We can, if this process moves forward and we lock in with our retailer, and we can purchase through our new electricity through our new retailer, effective July of '23, which looks at this point like it will happen and be a possibility, then we can do that. We can also lock in with our energy consultant, as we have done in the past, and then, do that for whatever period of time, and then allow the retailer and/or and then the solar energy to come into play in the future. So there's that choice. We have lots of choices, and probably not a lot of time and a lot of board meetings to do that. But the other discussion point is, do you wish to have the energy consultant talk about other ways to purchase solar power, if that is one of our goals, is to purchase solar power and to understand how it can be done and for what periods. And so that's a question that I have, and you can answer that now or you can answer that another time. But those latter two things, having the energy consultant provide information about rates beyond July of '21 and/or how to purchase solar other ways, those are two options that we could have at a future board meeting, whether it's regular or committee of the whole.
Yeah, Amber.
So I think when this discussion happens, it'll be really important to understand what the risk is that we're exposed to. So, when you're trying to make a decision between, this arrangement with this retailer or talking with the energy consultant about other models, I think as our role as board members is we have to manage downside risk very carefully. And so trying to do whatever's going to be safest for the district has to be a significant consideration. It sounds like, there's some really promising options here, but.
And I also look at it not only, Amber, as in managing risk, but also managing budget certainty. Because
Yes, and that's what I wasn't quite sure I understood with the settlement, like the extent to which you know what you're paying for electricity.
So the thing about the power purchase agreement, and we've said this in previous meetings, and so I guess this is a reiteration, is that, so it comes in at a fixed price per kilowatt hour.
Right.
Right? And then there is an escalator that's put on, an annual escalator, so it's going to go up at a totally predictable rate.
Okay.
That's just going to happen. Now, the settlement is, so that's what we pay.
Okay.
But that electricity gets sold into the market, and then basically the difference between those things, so if it's being sold at more on the market, there's a settlement cost. There's settlement, so we actually get this nice red number where we're garnering that back, and that would act as savings and a payment back to us like every month or on some regular basis, right? The retail
So kind of like
supplier.
puts solar panels on their house and has surplus.
Yeah, right. So then, like net metering, right? So it's a lot like that, right? And so different times of the year. In the summer, thing is going to be producing a whole lot, so that settlement is big. December, January, not so much, right?
Okay.
So it's the difference between those things. And if we're paying under 5 cents a kilowatt hour, but it's selling into the market at 5.8, that difference, that's good for us, right? So over the course of a year, what does that accrue to? And so when Greg has run the numbers, if the whole group were to go 100%, which that is not going to happen according to what people said they were going to put in.
Highly
But if they
unlikely.
were, right, it's very, very highly unlikely. But that's 35 million kilowatt hours, right? So when you do that, the total usage-based charges for 100% for our whole group would be about $2.5 million. Okay? The solar PPA cost would be $1.691 million, and the solar PPA settlement cost would be $2,130,000. So the net settlement to us before paying the retailer is $440,000. If the price goes up 50%, that net goes way up. So the more expensive the market is compared to our fixed price, mostly that's sort of the better, because we're saving more and more money. So that 50-50 is 50-50, but if you have a lot of volatility or really high electricity prices, that's really good for us because that electricity gets sold into the market and we reap the benefit for it. I think at our next meeting, we can go through those charts, right, to show that to everybody. Because and we can provide this ahead of time too, because I see Debbie nodding, right? She's like, yes, because sitting with the numbers only for 20 minutes or whatever in this next meeting, people are going to be like, well, why are you ambushing me with a decision when I could sit with them for 2 weeks or something like that? So we'll make sure that everybody gets that. But I wanted to make sure that we answer that question.
That was helpful.
Okay. Do you have anything to add, or?
No, at some point, I believe I need a yes or a no about the energy consultant and those types of things.
Right.
And also, when you reference next meeting, are we talking the 23rd, or are we talking the next committee meeting? Just so that that's clear in my mind.
I think it should be in our next board meeting.
That's what I assumed. I just wanted to be clear.
Yep.
Okay.
Are there any other thoughts or questions? Debbie.
Thank you. I guess I do have some concern, given the complicated nature of this conversation, about whether we can have the full conversation that we need to have within the span of a board meeting that has a full agenda. And whether I know we all don't want another meeting, but whether we need to have a special work session just on the SPPA, possibly after we've already answered Randy's questions. Like, I guess I, as one of 9, would be very happy to see what our energy consultant would come up with for other alternatives. I mean, we have to know what we're doing, if I'm understanding correctly, after June or July anyway, because we only have our rates locked in through that. So we have to have a plan. So we need to know what our options are for that, because if the solar isn't ready yet, we need something.
Or we can use the new retailer.
The new retail, right. So, but I'm not sure I'm fully understanding anyway, I just feel like there's a lot going on, and I worry about fatigue and being able to fully have this conversation in the span of a larger meeting when we're looking at the clock going, oh my gosh, are we ever going to get home tonight? So I'm just throwing that out there as a thought. I don't know if that's something that board leadership wants to talk about with Mr. Johnston and Randy. I'm open to what the group wants, but that is a concern of mine, that we might need a significant quantity of time to have this conversation. And I want to make sure we give ourselves the time to have that conversation.
I'm with you.
Thanks.
Yep.
I just want to remind the board, when we went into this new work session, that if we had items that warranted to be pulled out to have a separate meeting or one-time meeting, that we could do that.
Yep.
Okay? It didn't facilitate having the meeting regularly, but to have that one-time discussion, we could do that.
So you can be more strategic with how you use your time then.
Correct.
Yes. I'm just suggesting this may be one of those times.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Laurel.
I actually wanted to follow up on what was just said there, that I think Debbie put in much better words the same type of concern that I voiced less clearly earlier during our section.
Okay.
On when we were talking, and I said, well, we've been told just have this time. So I just wanted to say that. Sorry, didn't have a specific question for you, Peter.
Cool. I don't have anything else to add, but we have some pretty clear enough next steps. And then the boundary study, you had sent an update and.
I just wanted to, just verbally, 30 seconds, we had expected to have a first presentation from Crabtree Rohrbaugh on the 23rd. However, their colleague has a conflict, and so we're just going to bump that to February 6th meeting, knowing that that may take a little bit longer. When we look at the full agenda, if we feel that we need to make it another night, we will work to schedule that with them. And it probably will take a little bit longer, but depending on the items on the rest of the meeting agenda. It's coming in early February, no matter what. And that's working towards a more complete analysis and conversation sometime in March.
Okay. Questions? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to finance and audit. And Mr. Brown?
Deb and I. And want to introduce Randy Brown, who's here to just give us an update regarding the budget development planning for next year. And there is a presentation that, among other issues, addresses changes in relation to revenue and also changes in relation to the PSERS commitment on the part of the school district and its impact on the budget.
Okay, so there we go. So just wanted to give you an update. As far as budget development, we are looking towards the meeting on the 23rd for action on the opt-out resolution. What that opt-out resolution does, just as a reminder, is it notifies the community that any increase in taxes that the board would approve would be set no higher than 4.1% or equal to the Act 1 index. Not guaranteeing there would be an increase, but that would be the maximum at this point in time. As Dr. Duffy said, we're going to talk mostly about revenue today. And where we are, these are items that are changed since the last presentation. They are highlighted in detail on the statements that Mrs. Watson and her staff have prepared. So specifically here, we're talking about earned income tax. Our prior assumption would be an increase of 2.5%. And our updated assumptions for the 22-23 year are 3.7%, and then the next 2 years are 3.5%. Then following years, 3 years are 3%. Our 5-year average is 3.7%. The Independent Fiscal Office has projected changes in personal income tax to range from a loss of 3.2 to more than 4.9% over the next 6 years. This amounts to, for the current year in dollars, $240,000 for the current year, as I said. Next year's budget would be $450,000, and then over the period of 2031 to 2031 would be $8.1 million. So this is, over that entire year period, it is a sizable dollar amount. Again, these are estimates, and we hope that these estimates are accurate, but when we're going out those multiple years, they could be obviously less depending on what economic factors come into play. Interest on investments, we are seeing a significant increase in available rates in 2022. The increase in federal funds rate went from 1.75 in June to 4.5% in December. So a large reason for that increase is the increase in the rates. So we're looking at in 22-23 an increase of 1.5 million, estimating in the next fiscal year of 1.8. And then each of the following years, 700,000 for a total of $4 million. Looking at the earned income tax historical percentages, we just provided those for you there as an example. Obviously, 22-23 would be not historical, but it would be our projected, and then the budget of in 23-24. In interest income, just graphing out our historical again, as well as our projected for the current and budget year. PSERS employer rates, in the current year, we are paying 35.26% of percentage of salaries, eligible salaries to PSERS on behalf of employees. In December, that rate was adjusted for the 23-24 year to be 34%. So I'm just showing you in a graphic or in the chart the net change in expense revenue and then net expense or increase or decrease. We do get reimbursed about 50%. So this chart just shows the new employer rates. And then this chart is from different points in time, the projections of the employer rates, just to show you how it has changed over time. And then this is the, help me with this slide.
The projected, the updated, yep, sorry, the based on the last rates that we had, what the projection was for PSERS expense, and now with those adjusted rates, because each December, the actuaries, PSERS actuaries, projects the rates again. And so this time they're lower in the more recent upcoming years, but then they're higher in the later years. So this is what the impact is.
Our future local revenue topics include real estate tax this week and ending on Tuesday of next week. Donna is working with our local tax collectors to finalize tax collection for the July 1 bills. So we'll have those results as far as what actual tax collections were and what that equaled to as far as a tax collection percentage. We'll also have delinquent taxes, an update for you there as well. And then interim billings will be coming in February, and so we'll be able to get at least potentially some updates there in addition. So on January 23rd, we're looking at the approval of the opt-out resolution. February 20th, we'll have additional local revenue, and then additional topics in addition to compensation would be student activities and athletics and all expense areas. Keeping in mind that if there are any staffing requests over and above the current year complement, we will be bringing those obviously in a future meeting as well. But we're just receiving over this week and next week the budget requests from our departments and buildings. And over the next month or so, we'll be evaluating those to understand what impact they would have, and if there's any way that any increases in one area can be made up for in a decrease in another area. Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, but I want to thank you first, and thank you too, Donna, for participating this evening. And thanks for your help in putting this together. Are there any questions or comments from members of the board? Deb?
I just have one question on the interest income. Is that interest on Does that also include interest on our dedicated funds, like our new healthcare reserve fund and the
That would-
capital reserve
and-
fund?
Not capital, anything that's in the general
Okay.
general fund.
Sounds good.
So the healthcare reserve would be part of the assets of the general fund.
Okay.
Capital reserve and capital projects are their own funds.
Okay.
And we would talk about those interest changes.
Separately.
Separately, correct.
Thank you.
And so that's the 8% fund balance, 8% of the budget that needs to be set aside into the fund balance, and that.
Our cash
that can be-
balance
That can
is-
be invested?
Our cash balance at any one time
Right.
may
May go up
would
or
be at a minimum equal to our fund balance, but is at many times higher than our fund balance, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
It would be equal to our fund balance if all of our payables were paid.
Right. Well, I realize that 8% really is a figure based on the fixed point July 1. I mean, essentially. And things can go all over the map before that time. So-
I get myself in trouble whenever I try to explain that the fund balance is a savings account.
You're right.
It's not equal to the amount of cash, though, that we have available to invest.
So we don't have the time, but there's a technical question I would like to ask, but we don't have the time for it right now. Anything else? Any
Send
other
it in to
questions
me
or
separately,
comments?
Dan.
Well, I'll share with you later, Randy. Thank you.
Sure.
It's a personal interest thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'll pass the baton on to the board president.
Okay, should we take a 5-minute break and then reconvene for the, well, actually, we should do public comment. Let's do public comment first. After public comment, we'll do that.
Great.
Okay, so at this time, we have time for public comment, with each individual allotted up to 3 minutes for items discussed up to this point on the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. So, time for public comment, if anybody would like to make a comment. No? Okay, anyone? Let me check the Zoom. Nobody has their hand raised. If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment. Okay, then seeing none, we will take a 5-minute recess. Okay. So are we?
I love the like.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Welcome back to the meeting. We're moving on to routine approvals. Item 6, and I will be looking for a motion to approve the routine approvals as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on the routine? Yes.
I just have a really quick request. For things like the out-of-state overnight student travel, sometimes it uses an acronym and I don't know what it stands for, and I'm just so curious what our kids are doing. So something like the CSPA Spring Convention. I don't know what that is. So if we could spell that out, that would just be awesome. Because then I would learn.
In general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I did have a question about that one too, and I don't know if it got straightened out, and it's not a huge deal, but it seemed like there was an error potentially, like there were 2 trips going to the same high school, and one was paid by us for a really low fee, and one was the Delta, like, all-school trip.
There
And-
was an update made this afternoon.
Oh, there was, and I just didn't catch it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool
So
beans.
look at the new
Washington
version.
DC, see, that makes a lot more
Okay.
sense than Skilkenny High School, because I didn't know why all of Delta would want to go to some high school out towards Danville. Got it.
Good.
Thanks. That was just weird.
All right. Any other questions on routine items?
I want to acknowledge a volunteer who's stepping up
Yes.
to help us through our committee structure. Her name is Renee Hoover, and she's recommended by Gene Canals to serve on the CAC for School Health and Safety Committee. And so, I mean, I just want to bring her name forward. Someone has a master's in counseling, has worked at the university, also has worked involved in the public schools, and we really appreciate the assistance of everyone who helps, but I just want to point up Renee's volunteering to assist us with our work.
Yeah, I agree. I think she'll be a great addition to that committee.
She comes highly recommended.
Yes, and I know Renee as well. And she's got a great background for
Fantastic.
helping with this work.
Wonderful.
I think it's a good idea to recognize every time we have someone on the
Absolutely.
agenda.
I agree.
For
Thank
one
you.
of these roles. Thank you. Okay, so is there any public comment on the routine approval items? Okay, and if anyone is in the Zoom audience and wants to make public comments on any of these items as we're voting, just feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom. Okay, so we will have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Okay, so the first item under action items is a motion to accept the resignation of myself, Ms. Amber Concepcion, President and Board Member of State College Area School Board, to be effective on January 17th. And there's a letter in attachment 7A. So.
I have a few comments. On behalf of the district, I would like to congratulate Amber on becoming a Center County Commissioner and recognize her contributions to our school community. We are proud to see you take on this leadership role based on your distinguished service for the past 11 years, including 9 years as president. We know you will excel as a commissioner. During your tenure, we were able to accomplish a great deal, including the State High project, 3 elementary school building projects, a new school day, the memorial field renovation, an elementary STEM program, and curriculum updates, as well as an equity policy and resolution. That's quite a packed decade. Throughout all this, your leadership helped carry us through exciting as well as challenging times in education, and we appreciate all that you have done to further the district's growth. Above all, we're most grateful for your unwavering dedication to our students and your deep commitment to public education. We know that your passion for civic involvement will carry over to your important work ahead, as we wish you the best.
Thank you, CJ.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, if there's no motion, you can't leave, right?
I was noticing that too.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.
Now I want to say something.
Okay. Thank you. And then I
So-
have a few remarks.
So I have a comment from myself, and then 3 others from former board members. So here's what I wanted to. Why am I crying? This is what I wanted to say. And some of this is repeat from what CJ said, but that's okay. On behalf of all the board members who have had the privilege to work with Amber, I want to congratulate her on her appointment to County Commissioner. Amber has served on the board for 11 years and is board president for 9 of those years. She has led the district through the successful completion of several construction projects, and then I was going to list them, but CJ already did. But there's a plethora. The point being, and these are LEED certified facilities, which will serve K through 12 students for many years to come. Amber's contributions to SCASD are too plentiful to list, although CJ tried. I would like to highlight a specific time period in which she both led and persevered. The spring of 2020. The pandemic hit and uncertainty abounded, yet Amber remained strong and supported K through 12 students, teachers, staff, and administrators through that challenging and uncertain time while simultaneously facing some serious health issues. Amazingly, or not, because we are talking about Amber, she never dropped a single ball. Anyone who knows Amber knows how intelligent, kind, compassionate, and funny she is. I can assure you all this as well. She is a good friend. Center County is extremely lucky to have her in the position of County Commissioner, and although we are so very happy for her, we will miss her tremendously. Amber, you will truly be missed, but we wish you all the luck in the world. I have also one to read from Jim Leos. This is what Jim said. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Amber for her service to the State College School District. I'm proud to have served on the board with Amber, and I am grateful for her leadership, particularly during the rough times. Center County's gain is the school district's loss. Thank you, Amber, for your leadership and your gift of time, and thanks to Bien and your children for sharing you with all of the children in the school district. This is from Penny Fishbane. Amber Concepcion has served this community as SCASD board member for 11 years and 2 years as vice president and 8 years as president. She has served with integrity and was integral in receiving support from the community in the voting referendum for the State College Area High School building. She was involved in all the educational design and building projects during her tenure, as well as all the educational initiatives. Amber selflessly gave her time to the district on a daily basis for this non-paid elected position. She has always worked diligently and with fairness to all when leading the board and district. I am proud to have served with her on the SCASD board. She is a dynamic leader, and I wish her well in her next role as Center County Commissioner. Okay, now get ready to cry, because this is from Lori. It was the pleasure of my life to work with Amber Concepcion in my service to the State College Area School District. Amber sets the bar for what it means to be a public servant. I hope with all my heart that this community understands how lucky it is to have her. In the truest sense, Amber is a public servant we should be proud of. She has been tireless, even in the throes of serious illness, to see that our students, teachers, staff, and administrators were well served by the work of the board. The list of traits that make Amber so effective could go on and on. I would like to highlight what has been most impressive to me. First, Amber is brilliant. She is curious. Her insatiable appetite for scientifically based information and her desire to achieve understanding on complex topics has made her a valued voice in curriculum, student learning, and well-being, finance, working with teachers and staff to find ways to meet their needs, and yes, pandemic response. Next, Amber is a diplomat and community builder. She understands people and that differences of opinion are important for good deliberation and decision-making. always adhering to and reminding us of the facts that should be at the heart of those deliberations. Finally, she is genuine, kind, and authentic. Amber is simply one of the loveliest people you could know. She is an amazing mom, colleague, and friend. I am so happy for the bright future that awaits her and all of Center County as she begins her new position. Thank you for everything, Amber. And that's from Lori. And I think, Amy, did you have some comments?
No, I can't. I'll pull a Gretchen. I'll say ditto all those things, and I just really appreciated our time working together.
Me too.
And it will always be one of my most cherished times in my life.
Me too. Okay. I'm going to try and read my comments. Serving as a board member and president of the board has been an incredible honor and an amazing learning experience. I'm so incredibly grateful for the opportunity to have worked alongside so many extremely dedicated board members and district leaders over 3 terms. I've learned a great deal from every one of you and formed a depth of friendships that come from working together on a shared mission. When I decided to run for school board, I was a PhD student with 3 tiny children and was looking for ways to become more involved in the education system on their behalf. Our district was struggling with some really difficult budget problems in the wake of state funding reductions at that time, and residents from across our district were intensely involved in expressing what various school programs meant to each of them. I initially wanted to give voice to the needs going forward of young families with kids coming into the school system. What I quickly realized when I began serving as a board member is that this role is not one where we can particularly represent the interests of any one sector of our community, but that we must make decisions that balance the best interests of the entire community and even future generations in our community. In working with district administrators and other board members, I learned to view our work here through a different lens than I had initially brought to the role. Public schools are one place in communities that are heavily populated by staff members whose lives are built on service to others, and where an ethic of serving the greater good is demonstrated day in and day out. Public schools are at their best when they serve the needs of each and every child who enters our schools and nurture a love of learning and a sense of belonging in each unique child. School boards and district leaders have the challenging role of working with each other, with families, diverse staff members, and other community stakeholders to build a system that works for all kids. I'm so grateful to each of you who work so hard to meet the needs of our students, and so grateful for how much I have learned from you about how to approach decisions with a lens focused on the greater good. So, thank you all. Okay, now I think you have to vote.
So if we haven't made a motion, you can't leave.
I asked about that.
You would yet to make a motion, so.
Yeah, thank you all for all of your kind words, and I mean, it's just been an amazing experience serving here and thinking about, all the people I've worked with over the years in this district and how much I've learned in this role about just how to view making decisions that affect whole communities, so.
I will very reluctantly make the motion to accept your resignation, but we don't want to see you go. And it has really been a pleasure. I'm so glad we overlapped for at least the year.
Yeah, with a combination of joy and sadness, I have to second that motion.
Okay.
Take straws.
Is there any public comment? Okay. All right, then seeing none, you'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
I don't want to vote yes. Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion, I don't think you can vote. Dr. Crevecoeur. Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed then. Item B is a motion to approve the election of a board president to begin their term when my term ends on January 17th. Is there a nomination for the office of president? Debbie?
I would be pleased to nominate Jackie Huff.
Okay.
I'd be happy to second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? Is there any other nomination for president? Okay, is there a motion to close the nominations?
So,
Okay.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of closing the nominations, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Okay, the nominations are closed. Is there any public comment? Okay. So all those in favor of electing Jackie Huff as president, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. So congratulations, Jackie. And thank you so much for your willingness to step into this role.
Thank you. It's been a huge honor to work with you all the past year, and I'm really looking forward to working with each of you as long as I'll be here. As long as you all will be here, which I hope is forever, but as it turns out, nothing lasts forever. And good luck, Amber.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jackie, and I think you'll do great, and you've got lots of people around to give you feedback, so. And that's, yeah, working together and collaboratively on how to move things forward, things will work out. So, all right. Item C is a motion to approve Policy 220, Student Expression. That is shown in Attachment 7C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
I'll just remind everyone that we've looked at this a few times. We took it to students. We got feedback from students. And so now we're bringing it for a final vote.
All right. Any public comment? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to approve the food service equipment bid award. That is shown in Attachment 7D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay. Any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, all right, that item has passed. Item E is a motion to approve the Geisinger Dental Services Agreement shown in Attachment 7E.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item F is a motion to approve the building automation system for Park Forest Elementary. This is shown in Attachment 7F.
So moved. Seconded.
That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? Okay. All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes. Item G is a motion to approve the local service tax collection agreement shown in Attachment 7G.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Any public comment? All right, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. And then item H is not on the agenda.
Correct.
Yep. Nope. I mean,
Okay. So looking out to future meetings, we have a board conversation with the community tomorrow at SCLO Library in the Downsboro Community Room at 12:30 in the afternoon tomorrow. And so we're hoping to see as many community members as possible to come out and chat with us about whatever is on your mind. January 17th, Policy Development Committee will be meeting in the boardroom here at Panorama. January 23rd is the next regular board meeting here at Panorama. One of the action items will be the accelerated opt-out resolution in the budget development process. So With that, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that's, then there's been a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Okay. Anyone opposed? All right. Thank you, everyone. No, it should never end.